This meeting is being recorded.
Good afternoon. The law firm of Hull & Chandler is proud to sponsor the Leadership Series, a program where Hull & Chandler attorney Rocky Cabagnot interviews local and regional leaders in the nonprofit, private, and public sectors to discuss the real-world interplay of law, business, and the social dynamics within the context of our continuously changing times. Rocky helps nonprofits stay legally compliant, avoid legal problems, and resolve legal issues as they come up. Nonprofits looking for legal services can choose to bring Rocky on as a management team member through the Fractional General Counsel program, or can utilize Rocky as an attorney on standby through our firm's affordable legal subscription service. If you want to learn more, you can follow up with me directly. Don't let your nonprofit go without access to quality legal counsel when it needs it. Rocky, take it away.
All right. Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Hull & Chandler Leadership Series. I'm Rocky Cabagnot. I'm your host. Thank you for the intro, as always, Shannon. Today is a very happy day. I get to talk to one of my favorite people here in the Charlotte area, and also about one of my favorite topics, which is legal services for the poor. So I think I've spent a lot of time talking about my life prior to coming to Hull & Chandler, one having been an executive director at a nonprofit, another being a law professor at a now defunct law school here in Charlotte. But prior to that, I spent 9 years as a legal service attorney in North Central Florida. And so that was my first job out of law school. I started off as an AmeriCorps attorney, which the interesting thing I tell people is that I made more money. I did a clerkship at the law firm called Womble Carlisle for a summer versus the whole entire year that I was an AmeriCorps housing attorney. And then I had the opportunity to go on and become what they call the Equal Justice Works Fellow, where I spent 2 years developing a sort of a legal aid outreach program in the very hinterlands of North Central Florida. And then I got into community economic development, which then led into the nonprofit stuff. But joining us today is a friend, somebody who I consider sort of a local hero in many respects, Mr. Toussaint Romain, who has been appointed as the new CEO of Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy, or for some of those who remember, the Legal Services of Southern Piedmont. And so we had talked with Toussaint, and we wanted to kind of give him a platform to kind of discuss what his vision is that coming in as the newly installed CEO. But before we get into that, I know I always ask this question. I always crib it from our friend Pat McDowell, who always asks a question on his podcast: what was your path to nonprofit leadership? So Toussaint, maybe you could answer that question. I think a lot of folks would just maybe are familiar with you at a certain level, but maybe you could give a little background. Tell us, how did you get to become your path to becoming the CEO of Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy?
That's a really great question, Rocky, and I've only been here for 30 days, so I'm not entirely sure I want to reveal that secret, because they may get rid of me too, right? Since my path is not one that was necessarily a clear one. I mean, let me be honest, the only reason I'm here, and I'll continue to be here, is for the client that we serve. Mm-hmm. There's some mother sitting in a chair that won't ever get the resources they need, able to get through the systems that we have in place. There's veterans who can't get to their VA services or benefits, right? Public benefits, after serving our country and nearly dying for us. There are immigrants coming here for a better life and have so much bureaucracy and red tape that they can't work, although they want to. And people with disabilities, and I think most significantly the seniors. Those are our clients too. Seniors who have aged to a particular number where they're unable to work, who are on fixed incomes, are finding that they have to choose between medication, food, or electricity, right? And that's really troubling to me. And so I think my life's work has always been to improve and to serve others. A lawyer, as I once read, is defined as a consummate professional, or more explicitly, someone who heals the ills of society. So lawyers can really help heal society's ills. Another way of looking at it is, as Charles Hamilton Houston once wrote.
Oh, I love this quote.
Yeah, right. A lawyer is either a social engineer or a parasite on society.
On society, yeah.
Or it's either taking money or power from people, or they're helping to build a better tomorrow. And so I think in all of the work, that theme has been consistent for me across the spectrum. But if I could be a little more, maybe sharing my family background. My parents are from the islands. I'm the son of immigrants, right? My grandmother's brothers came here, ended up serving in the military, and then worked at a call center to get folks to come to the Dr. King March on Washington back in the day. Like, those are my grand uncles, right? My father became successful in Brooklyn, New York, where I was born. And so Shirley Chisholm, the congresswoman who was real famous, ran for president, used my father's ballroom as her headquarters. I lived at Rosa Parks for a week. Julian Bond, who marched with Dr. King, became a mentor of mine in law school. I could list 50 other people that I've had an opportunity to spend time with and learn from. And they've, in many ways, Rocky, passed the mantle on to me to continue this legacy of change for the most vulnerable. And that tends to be Black, white, and poor white people, right? And that's where my work effort has really been. And I think that effort, that essence, that's, I guess, just passion is what's driven me to do the work wherever the opportunity would create itself.
Yeah, I think most people obviously know you from the events actually after the Keith Lamont Scott shooting. I think that if those of you who might have, glued to CNN or during that period, would see a gentleman wearing a black tie and try to getting between, the protesters and the police. And I think, in many respects, being able to bridge two worlds, and I think this is an amazing, a talent or just a set that, can come because, when you think about legal services for the poor, it is an institution, right? It's been around for, I think, since the war on poverty, right? It was established, the Office of the Legal Services Corporation. Now, I know that Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy is an unrestricted program, which is great because then you don't have all those LSE restrictions that force you to. I was in an LSE program. That's how I know. I always looked with fondness and longing towards those programs that could actually do class actions and things of that nature, where I couldn't even ask for attorney's fees, for winning in a landlord-tenant case because Newt Gingrich had said I couldn't, So there was that. But but that idea of being able to bridge two worlds, because again, the world of those who are living in poverty, which it keeps growing. It's not like it's COVID, everything hasn't, that if anything is exacerbated. We're now seeing record inflation. It's just, you go to the gas pump. It's like if you're not in poverty, you're getting. We're all a little bit closer to poverty. I feel like I'm getting a little bit. Each time I look and see $6 a gallon or something ridiculous. Well, okay, I'm looking at diesel, but I'm pretty sure I turn to the left. It's going to say $6 at some point. But because that idea, is like a poverty and that you can't afford a lawyer, right? You can't. It's, I guess, a justice, is only, it's only best if you have access to justice with an attorney, because, you go to any, if you ever want to just, and it's something that we did a long time ago with experiments, if you ever just want to sit in court and just kind of almost like taking score, right? You have a little like pen and pad, and if someone shows up with a lawyer versus not having a lawyer, what's their win-loss record? Particularly if you go in like landlord-tenant, right? If there's a legal service attorney, right, from either Legal Aid of North Carolina or from, Center for, Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy, most likely that case is going to be resolved, in a manner. It's probably going to have an actual full-blown trial, right? They're actually going to challenge the landlord, the housing authority, some sort of institution of that nature. But the vast majority of individuals who are facing homelessness with eviction, because particularly if you're low income, if you're getting evicted out of your apartment, it's someone's couch, or maybe a spot in Tent City or something like that is next up. And every once in a while you might, there might be that the magistrate may feel like stopping the eviction, but the track record for those who are not represented by attorneys facing, like you were talking, issues of disability rights, your check, your income maintenance, things of that nature, pretty slim. And I think that's really kind of our conundrum in our modern society, is that many of our really vital rights, just access to just life, really hinge upon whether you have an attorney or not sitting in front of, to deal with like your housing or your benefit check or something like that. So I know I went on a little bit of a tangent there, but I just know I would just say when Toussaint and I start talking, I mean, it's kind of, it's kind of like, I don't know, like old friends kind of like just catching up and stuff. And we'll give an opportunity for everyone to pop in too, so don't worry about that.
But to respond to that, Rocky, and I agree with you in what you're saying, which is why I find the work I do very unique and rewarding, but also hard to explain, right? Why be a legal aid, little lowercase l, lowercase a, legal aid type of work? Why work and support those who can't afford an attorney? And I oftentimes say I'm like a hospice worker, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is where people are sent to kind of transition to death more peacefully. And I'm not sure if you've ever had to deal with a hospice worker before, but families who had a hospice worker support them have often said, my mother was dying, I was losing it, the bills were due, everyone was calling me, I didn't know how to speak to the doctors, and I just wanted to sit next to my mother's bed for her last couple of hours. And this hospice worker showed up and really took everything off of my plate and helped me get through this process. And that's what a legal aid attorney does. An immigrant shows up and has no clue how to get through this process to move closer to work authorization. Someone who, if you've ever been to the courthouse and you're going there for family, family law or divorce or going to pay a ticket, right? It's really hard to get around the courthouse. But imagine having someone there that can help walk you through, who was fighting for you and who's there to say, we're going to get through this together. I feel very much like a hospice worker in that I'm helping people get access to justice. And because of my legal expertise and the other attorneys and support staff here, because of our legal expertise, we're supporting people who are in dire death-like straits, right? And that's important. But I want to make this point very clear, Rocky. The system isn't broken. This system is not broken. It's working the way it's been designed to work. If you think about it, only poor people, indigent folks, are suffering at the hands of our criminal justice system, our civil law system, and that's the reality here. As a prime example of what the work we do here, there was an apartment complex in Lake Arbor in Western Georgia. And we had one tenant show up and say, hey, this is deplorable living conditions. I can't live here anymore. Please help me. We had 9 more people show up independent of each other, right? Didn't know they were all coming. And so we realized we had 10 people all saying the same thing. And the landlord was a slumlord and refused to do anything to change the conditions of that living, of their living conditions, like quiet enjoyment, we would call it, right? Or habitable living conditions. As we would say, legal world. And what ended up happening is our organization filed a civil action lawsuit against Lake Arbor. We won, right? And in conjunction with Robinson, Bradshaw, Henson, a firm uptown Charlotte, we won and received a $500,000 settlement from before these clients. And every single unit has to be improved. And that current landlord is no longer the property manager, someone else is. It's this way of realizing that these poor folks living in these apartment complexes would have been stuck in that situation had not been for lawyers who were able to be hospice workers and walk you through to a better tomorrow. And I think that's the work that's really important to identify. This system is meant to be this system is an exploitation type system. Our capitalist society, while I think is better than the alternatives, is based on exploitation. Free labor force, taking advantage of poor people, making poor people pay high court costs and fees, and then using that to basically as a tax of some ways. And so when that's happening, And when we're seeing poor folks, poor white folks, black folks, and brown folks filling up our courthouses and being victims of this system, it's important that we have legal aid attorneys or those who are able to step up and really fight for the individual. But not just that. There's also this need to change the system, right? And to have systemic advocacy and bring more awareness to the concerns that folks are having. We had 10 people come to us saying they're being, living in horrible conditions. But we needed to change that entire complex for everyone, not just those 10, right? And this is the kind of work that I'm a part of. This is the kind of work I love doing, and this is why it's needed. Otherwise, things would remain the same, and I think that's a problem. But it's also not a war on poverty, because it's poverty. If that was the problem, then the solution would be just give money, right? And everything would change. But giving money to this type of war is not the answer, because you still have broken school systems. You still have, communities that are falling apart. You have situations where folks are policed differently, right? I mean, it's the entire ecosystem, entire system that someone lives in. That's the problem. But again, it's the way things have been built, and they're working the way they were intended to work. Prisons work the way they were meant to.
So you mentioned systemic advocacy, because I think that's, because I think for those who are wondering, like, because they think, well, lawyers, they file suits or they defend suits or such. But now that you're at the helm of Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy, and you're talking about systemic things, what are at least, that you have seen and continue to see would be areas of systemic advocacy or advocacy to address the system that you would want to see this new organization you're at the helm of be at the forefront of?
So it's a good question, Rocky, and I take a little bit of a roundabout direction on this answer. And I'll simply say this. There's a concept called sequential intercept, which is used in criminal justice, but for this purpose, if you remember the I Love Lucy episode where Ethel and Lucy are sitting in the chocolate factory.
Oh yeah, they keep eating it, but then they just keep coming.
Yeah, right. So I want you though for a moment, just picture this conveyor belt. And on this conveyor belt, at the beginning of the conveyor belt is a nude man or a nude woman. I apologize for the imagery. There's a nude person at the beginning of this conveyor belt. Someone hits the on switch. That nude person goes down, someone takes them off and puts clothing on it, right? They get back on the conveyor belt, go down a little further, someone takes them off and puts food in their belly and gives them groceries. They get on, they go down a little further, someone takes them off and gives them a trade, a skill, a degree, a diploma, right? Whatever, they get back on, a job, back on and off, right? Housing and community and support. It's this idea of sequential intercept, that at every sequence of someone's life, they're intercepted and someone gives them the support that they need.
Okay.
That is systemic advocacy, right?
Okay.
It's understanding that along the path of everyone's life, they are going to need help somewhere, because that help will help them improve their own life and living conditions. Let me be honest, and Christina and Jessica, I'd love for you to nod your heads in agreement or disagreement. But aren't we beneficiaries of a conveyor belt? Hasn't there been someone in our life along the way in every part that helped us either go to soccer practice, right, or learn how to play the piano, or they fed us, or they taught us, or they encouraged us to get that skill or that, or to go down that profession or another profession? I mean, each one of us that would consider ourselves to be successful had a working conveyor belt. The people who are Black, brown, and poor communities, poor white folks, don't have functioning conveyor belts, right? Or if they do, their conveyor belts end them up in more poverty or in prisons and jails or in courthouses. When I was a professor at UNC Charlotte, my students ended up in corporate America. Jessica was just sharing that with me, right? But as a public defender for a decade, the folks that were coming into my office ended up in corporate prisons. And it's important to kind of recognize that those paths are designed certain ways. But what if we repurpose the conveyor belts in the Black, brown, and poor white communities to be just as beneficiary and to have as much efficacy or work like they do in middle and upper class white neighborhoods and communities, right? Maybe we would see systemic advocacy or systemic change. And that's the level of advocacy, advocation. Ad is the prefix, basically for or to do, right? And vocation is a job. Advocation means this is for the job in essence, or to do, administer, right? To give, to do. Advocation. I'm an advocate. This is my job to speak about the system and to make things better. And I think that's where we got to get to as far as defining systemic advocacy and working together to have that sequential intercept, that conveyor belt work for all of us.
You mentioned your career as a public defender in there, and it's one kind of an interesting question, because I know when I was a legal aid attorney and I'd say, oh, well, I work with poor people, a lot of people would assume I'm a public defender, right? And maybe sometimes vice versa. Some people say they're a public defender, they assume they're a legal aid attorney. And I think maybe just to sort of help folks, because you've been in both worlds, right? So you were a public defender and now you're in legal aid, is maybe to explain to the folks out there what exactly is the difference between a public defender and a legal aid attorney, because maybe folks may not necessarily know.
Yeah, great. The only difference is in the job performance, not in the passion or the heart. I'm always a public defender. I'm still a public defender, right? But public defenders are attorneys appointed by the Constitution to represent criminal matters. So there's constitutional right to an attorney, right? And it only, again, applies to criminal matters. So murder, drugs, alcohol, driving while impaired, criminal things. A legal attorney is not an attorney who's guaranteed by the Constitution. So you don't have a right to an attorney to handle a landlord-tenant matter, right? But legal aid attorneys, capital or lowercase l, lowercase a, deal with landlord-tenant, consumer protection, HIV/AIDS, right? They deal with criminal expunctions or driver license restoration and a host of other things. And a pro bono attorney can be anybody. A legal aid attorney, pro bono attorney could be anyone who deals with the civil aspects of someone's challenges. I'll share it though in another way. I think without a legal aid attorney, you have a need for a public defender. So when I was working at Tent City and I was going over there bringing athletes, professional athletes and hospitals and churches that go over there and provide services, there were whole families that had a house, right, before that, but because they were in the service industry, COVID closed all that. They were homeless in Tent City. There was a very likelihood that the father could have resorted to crime to be able to provide for his family, right? The head prosecutor here in Mecklenburg County once said, robberies are a crime of desperation. And folks can get so desperate that they commit crimes. If a crime is committed, that person is going to need a public defender. But if we can prevent the crime from being committed by providing support for legal aid issues, right, then that makes everything better. So when you have legal aid attorneys doing their job, there's less of a need for public defenders. And those things are very interrelated. But a public defender does that work for the very same reason a legal aid attorney does this work. It's a passion for the people. There's a close proximity or as a few folks have used this particular word, get proximate to the cause, get close to it. If you talk to someone who is a public defender, they will share stories about how this type of thing hit close to home for them. Right? If you talk to a legal aid attorney, they'll tell, or a legal aid person, they'll tell you, yeah, I was homeless and I was on food stamps and I was living in shelters and no one helped us. Or my parents came over here as immigrants and we had the roughest time. My dad got, sent back to the country of origin. I'm doing this work because I want to make a change for others. Like I know what we go through and I want to make it better. Public defenders and legal aid attorneys who are there for that, for those reasons, would share that passion with you. I think but again, I think they work from different positions, perspectives, and parts within our system as a whole.
Yeah, I think that's a good succinct way of kind of showing the sort of the similarities, obviously, the differences there. And yeah, I think in many respects, because, you know, civil legal aid, and again, you talked about, you know, I think it was a Gideon, right? The Gideon is the case that allows constitutional right to a public defender. I know one of the ongoing themes in sort of the justice community and legal aid is the idea of a civil Gideon, right? To whatever extent that folks could, at least for these really sort of life affecting, you know, things like maybe an eviction or something like that, that you would at least be provided, you know, counsel, be provided an attorney. I know that it's not, it's something that always comes up. I know it's a topic that has always been, you know, kind of brought up. So I know you've been there for 30 days now, but could you tell us a little bit about what have you kind of observed and what have you kind of like seen that just from both from feedback from the community and just among your staff and your new team about where is Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy today and where do you think it's going?
Yeah, so it's also another great question. Ken Shore, who was the only executive director of this institution for, you know, the previous 35 years, has really built a solid foundation for this organization. There's a new building, and a lot of hope for what the next chapter will be. We're community partners, like we're in the community, and as you may know or know of me, I've been doing this work since 1996, right? I've been involved in the community of Charlotte for a really long time, mainly behind the scenes, but I've built a lot of great relationships. My hope is to really get the Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy connected with more campus partners, community partners, really getting engaged in the work, showing up in places where we get to help folks. Instead of having clients come to us, we get to go to them. And I think that's part of where we're going to be taking this. But we have our challenges, right? As most folks know, Charlotte is a very supportive city, meaning that the folks will give money and will listen to causes and care about things until the next big thing comes. And so I think we don't pay attention to issues long enough to really fix them or address them. But that's where, you know, being here and being part of this sustainable organization really get a chance to do that work and to get back into the community and get folks to do what we need as far as moving things forward. So, and I see Christina's question, how many lawyers, paralegals are on staff? And let me get the rest of it. And how are many volunteering time, but working other places? Yeah, so there are about 70 people on staff here at the Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy. That includes attorneys, that includes paralegals, includes a small administrative staff, but it also includes what we call navigators, or who are individuals that really get into the community, that are making the connections, building their relationships, speaking multiple languages, and helping us really move the needle as this work is concerned. And so for volunteering purposes, you're able to visit our website and find a tab up at the top that will allow you to volunteer. We have pro bono attorneys that are pro bono person in Casey that you can contact, and she'll help you get plugged in. But we also are looking for ways that we can plug in with you all as well, right? So if you're having a community event, or if you're having something and need some lawyers or some paralegals or some content, civil law, legal aid experts to show up and talk to folks, you know, we want to be there for that. And so I think all these things collectively work together. You know, we're looking for ways to improve what our outreach is, but also looking for ways to support those who want to come and be part of what we're doing over here. It's pretty exciting stuff, if I could say. And yeah, we have a lot of ways to go. Would a legal clinic be an option in a community? Absolutely, absolutely. So if we have expunctions, we have wills, we have taxes, I mean, areas of law that we cover. And so if we wanted to put together a legal clinic to help folks get wills done, we would show up with our attorneys and folks to do that. If it was an issue of, getting taxes done, we help support taxes. Or beyond that, if it was just, hey, how can we learn more about the substantive issues folks are dealing with? We'll show up to deal with that too. There's a church that reached out to us and they said, hey, we have a lot of Haitian immigrants showing up on our doorstep, and they have needs and legal issues, but we don't know how to help them. So we're showing up at this church, the attorneys and the immigrant attorneys that work here and paralegals, and we have someone who speaks the language, right, Creole, or the language that Haitians speak, and we're going to put on legal clinics for the immigrants who are there, but also legal trainings for the church members so that they know how to identify issues and support each other. So I think that's a really good opportunity for us to be in the community doing legal clinics, and we have more of those coming that I'm helping and supporting the staff in the future. We're having a Pride Day where we're really going to help support Pride and be trained by Pride folks to understand how we can better serve our clients who are the LGBT, IA community, right? So how do we? But then also we're helping in response or in exchange share our legal issues that those in that community might face. And so we're going beyond just the typical sitting here in the law firm waiting for folks to show up. We're in the community, right? That sequential intercept and finding what we can plug in to really help our community do better. But does that answer your question, Christina?
Yeah. Now, does Charlotte Center, do you help the kids in CMS have their records expunged, I believe, once they turn 18, or is it your group that does that? So
we do have criminal law expungement, so we can do expungements, and we do driver license restoration. It tends to be, those two things tend to be really hard, and we have pro bono attorneys that will participate with us, along with us. But if you have folks that you've identified that you like to say, hey, we are looking at getting this student's criminal record expunged, and we would do our part to help support there. It's interesting though, the age for a minor, the age of majority is no longer 16.
Yeah.
It is now 18 or higher, or 18. And so if there is a criminal record, it should already be expunged or sealed, right? But that's something for us to work together and look into, so we can support, again, folks in our community, Christina, that need the help, so they can do the next things they need to do, right?
Yeah, because I feel like, having that record holds people back from so many things, and to be able to have that opportunity to have their record expunged, I think just is, life-changing. It is life-changing, so yeah, I'm a pretty big advocate for that. So yeah.
For sure. I mean, I like to ask folks, have you ever had alcohol and driven a car? Have you ever hit somebody as you're driving? Have you ever wanted to punch somebody? Ever said something pretty? Have you ever taken something that wasn't yours? Yeah, I mean, all of us have. I know Shannon is pretty still-faced up there. She probably hasn't. But I think all of us have really done some things or something that, is breaking the law. Yeah. The folks that have criminal records are no different than us, except they got caught.
Yep.
They have the scarlet C for caught, right? That's the only difference. But because they got caught and we didn't, we're on two different paths. We're able to go to work and do things and be in places that those who have criminal records aren't able to access, and create these issues that we're talking about. And so folks who did something 10 years ago, a year ago, we're working to help expunge those records so that they can, with their own mobility, do what they can with what they have, right? And providing them the opportunity to do that is really important.
Yeah.
So I think this is a great connection here. So Christy is one of our longtime participants, and also I'm involved with a webcast at the Charlotte Mecklenburg Public Library, and that's where Christy works. She's involved with their nonprofit services division, and I mean, I obviously I'm a huge fan of our Charlotte Public Library system, and it really serves a purpose beyond just checking out books. And I think that going to what you've been saying, Toussaint, about getting the lawyers out into the community. I can't think of a better place to do, you know, a free legal clinic or a checkup or a diagnostic or driver's license restoration, you know, than at a place like a public library, which is a trusted institution in most communities. I mean, you know, if you're hot, most of the time, the place there's an AC and they're not going to, like, you know, run you out is the library, right? You know, I mean, and so, I mean, y'all should definitely connect after that, because, you know, two of my favorite institutions in town, the library and legal aid. I mean, it's always warmed my heart to see them kind of like connect, because two, you know, I think that there's a lot of good synchronicity there. So yeah, I think so I think I'm looking over here at the website here on my other screen here, and it's kind of it's you know, Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy has a lot of things here. So I see something called the Community Empowerment Project. Have you gotten kind of involved or been talking with the lawyers involved with the Community Empowerment Project?
Yeah, so I mean, we have, and I'm not on the website with you at the moment.
Yeah.
But we have, I'm not gonna look it up just yet, but we have some events that we're doing. So we're going into a particular community. We're gonna have representatives from every practice area show up, and we're gonna team up with the school or church or someone and just have a free legal clinic all day long, right? Mm-hmm. And allow folks to show up and get wills or get, you know, tested for HIV/AIDS, or just a variety of different services we're gonna have. And that will be in August. On July 16th, here on property, we're going to have a community event where we're inviting folks from the community to show up. We'll have a bouncy house, some taco trucks. We'll have some different things that we can use to improve to help get our story told. But we're also inviting community partners to show up as well, and to set up a table and for them to be able to explain what they're doing. And I think collectively, this would help all of us really use this space to tell our story, but also to let clients know we're here to support them. And so these are the type of activities or events that we're doing that are community empowerment. We do have, you know, again, like if there's immigrant issue, we will show up and get in the community and, you know, do presentations, talk about the issues. You know, we NC Medicaid expansion, we have folks from the Ombudsman program that work here for us, who are watching the, you know, trending, you know, the trends that are happening and creating awareness and getting back to the state saying, hey, this isn't working, because we're hearing from the community. There's everything that we're doing, because as I like to say to folks, when a client comes and shows up in my office, they may come for a tax issue, right? But once you get talking to them, they have every issue you could imagine. And so I really want us to get away from being an issue-based law firm, legal service provider, and getting more to a client-oriented legal service provider. When the client comes in, we're going to triage and really address every single issue they have, from the individual representation, but also from a systemic advocacy perspective, right? Here's what they came to us for legally, but how can we help them get better, or help them with what they need beyond what they've come to us for. And so that's our community empowerment, which means, Rocky, we can't do that alone. Mm-hmm. We need the libraries, right? We need so many other organizations. We need the hospitals. We need the politicians. We need the private, you know, partnerships. All of us are needed at the table to really deal with the work that's happening. And I like to equate it to emergency room. Someone's in a car accident. They're hanging out of their car, right? They're in a traumatic-like experience. You know, you don't have the nurse showing up to the scene. You really have, you know, first responders, right? Showing up, calling ambulance, getting over to the emergency room. And, you know, when you get to the emergency room door, you know, you have the trained experts who are ready to, you know, to wheel someone in. Then you have, you know, the emergency room folks doing what they do next. And everyone is working together, although they have their single part, to help save someone's life. Isn't that the same for the work we need to do but aren't we too siloed at this moment to actually get that done? And so I would love to see us being more connected, like an emergency room triage type of approach, so that we are really helping folks. So yeah, I've worked with a library in the past, David Sniffen, one of my buddies, and there was another initiative we worked on with The Hate You Give, that book, right? Where the library provided a lot of books through the foundation. I took those books and like 4 or 5 CMPD officers, and we went to Johnson C. Smith University. We read the book, or they read the book beforehand, hopefully. We watched the movie together and then sat down and had a no-holds-barred conversation. That was possible because of what the library did, right? And because what the library used its resources for, but because someone was an advocate, someone had the want to be in that room. And you mentioned earlier, bringing these two sides together. What happened was a really rich conversation, and the community was empowered afterwards. And so we have the ability to do this. There is a lot to do around this. I've been doing this for a couple decades, but doing it by myself. Now I get to be at an organization that has 69 other people who are saying, lead us into doing this work. And that's what's most exciting about working for the Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy.
Yeah, it sounds like you've got, it's almost like chief organizer in charge, it sounds like you've got and I think that is a new approach to practice of law, but also sort of, social justice lawyering, because I think you and I had talked about, I'd always, I was always, when I was in legal service, I was in community development, I always was in the community. I was always, staying at, like in church basements and having meetings with groups and, doing community development work. It was really, I wasn't an office job. I mean, I did have an office technically, but I wasn't just sitting in the office and just meeting with clients like I do now, kind of, I was, I was out there. And I think that I applaud that approach, because I think there are, and I think it kind of goes to this idea of what they call like the holistic practice of law, what you were talking about, instead of siloing, like, yeah, I mean, you can look at your website, you look at our website, right? We have, we have like tax law, or, and then in nonprofit law and in civil litigation and things like that nature. But even ourselves, we ask, well, what do other people do? So we can kind of know when it becomes, relevant to your own practice, right? Because, take for instance, landlord tenant, right? So someone comes in and they're kind of, single parent, single mother, and they're kind of like, they don't have enough income to pay rent. But then it turns out that they're not been getting child support, right? So perhaps, maybe getting child support, then, but maybe the child, if they have a child, maybe they're not doing well in school, and maybe they need an IEP, they need, they need special education, right? And perhaps they need to be on disability, right? So then that kind of, you get the income there, you kind of, these things kind of all kind of, there's always like a doctor in a way, right? Like you said, a triage.
Let me interrupt you, because I know we do that to each other. And let me answer this question again, maybe from more of a metaphor or an analogy. If you could picture the United States, there's 50 states, right? And every state is designed differently, has different lines, different sizes. Texas and California and North Carolina are all different shapes. Every state operates as a silo, sovereign and independent of each other, right? And they do that within the lines. If we identified, though, that every state has a capital, and that capital is represented by a red dot, we would have 50 separate silo, sovereign, independent states. But what if I could take a string and connect all of those red dots? It would no longer have 50 separate silo, sovereign, independent states. I would have one federal or United States where everyone works together. Likewise, as a preface to this next comment, there are between 4,000 to 10,000 nonprofits in Mecklenburg County. And they all operate silo, sovereign, independent of each other, right? No one's talking to each other or working with each other.
Yeah, I just had this discussion yesterday.
Really, yeah. So you're getting Christina. Like Samaritan Street, I love the organization and the folks that run it. I've known, met them. They give away shoes, right? What's beautiful thing is that they give away shoes to those who need it. But to my knowledge, they never ask, why are you shoeless to begin with? nor do they ask or provide you with the skills to get shoes on your own in the future. All right, but they are a very solid organization that I believe is important for this reason. And again, talking to your point, Rocky, and also your comment, Jessica, about there's so many people who don't know where to turn or what to do. Here's the reality. Remember that conveyor belt I told you about? So imagine that conveyor belt. Now let's take the real good nonprofits, and they're on this string, and we put them alongside this conveyor belt. So when someone hits the on switch, someone's going down, they need shoes, Samaritan's Feet takes them off, gives them shoes, but Samaritan's Feet puts them back on. And so they go down some more. The library has a number of resources for tech training, for soft skill training, for job, search. Someone's able to get to the library, get on, and then, and someone takes them off from the library, puts them on, the skills that they need and opportunities, and they get back on this conveyor belt. Go down a little further, and they have legal issues.
Mm-hmm.
And then, they go down a little further, and now that they've been through all of the pieces here, they want to tell their story.
Mm-hmm.
So they reach out to Shannon Hames, who says, Rocky, I got the best interview you're ever going to have ready for you. You know what I mean? And then they tell that story, and then that helps spread the message to the rest of the world, if not the community. This is the way things have to become connected. And the only way to do that is through this conveyor belt, but also through this idea of connecting the dots and getting the right organizations at the table or at the conveyor belt to help do this work. Jessica's point is still true. People don't know where to turn or what to do. Mm-hmm. That is absolutely true. And even when they do say help, they don't know what they're asking for or what they need help with. When I became a public defender initially, I didn't know, what I was doing, right? I didn't know how to help people or what the issues were. When someone had a mental health episode, I didn't know that's what was going on, right? I thought they were like, right? You're not a real lawyer. What are you talking about? But it's up to us as those who fill these spaces, right, to be the ones to identify the things people need help with, but to have the relationships with them to say, can I help you? And if they say yes, to then walk them down this conveyor belt to get what they need.
Well, I think that we're now seeing, and thank you so much, Toussaint. I think we're starting to see sort of like what you're going to bring to this organization and to this community. Because I think, you can't extract, it just obviously there's organizational leadership, and we can go to Patton's podcast, talk about that. But, there's the organization, but, Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy and Legal Aid North Carolina, but legal services has a very unique spot in sort of the social sector, and I think that given, I've always, this has been my gripe as well, Christina, about silos. And when we have the leadership series, is to sort of break silos within the nonprofit sector and try to make connections. Sometimes we do things at the Community Matters Cafe, and we try to invite some of people to try to connect them, because ultimately, there's so many, one thing, and I've always known this, that there's so many people doing great work in their own silo though. And I think what I'm getting out of this, and I hope that maybe our audience and I think the greater Charlotte community, I think that Toussaint has put forward a vision that he's going to work to use the very powerful and very good CCLA to become, like I said, I sort of call it head organizer in charge, but sort of a head connector, a head conveyor belt watcher, accountability thing. And I think that's, because there's so many great nonprofits, but I think that it's almost like we need to have the office of president of the nonprofits, someone who could I do the same thing for early childhood. There needs to be a superintendent, but president of the nonprofits who gives an audience says, listen, all you nonprofits, we're going to wipe out all these things in a certain way, and but there needs to be that conversation, and people still don't know what other people do, and I think that so I don't know. I'm going to make my nomination for Toussaint to be president of the nonprofits. I say here, in your leadership here.
I respectfully deny.
Well, yesterday I was saying, there were a lot of funders in the room, and there were a lot of people that work with funders and nonprofits, and there were some nonprofits in the room. And you know, I think according to GuideStar, there's about 5,800 nonprofits. Whether or not they're all active, you know, we don't know. But there are so many silos. And so this conversation yesterday had to do with how the funders create those silos, you know, because they're making these nonprofits fight for this money, you know. And so then the nonprofits put themselves in silos because they're going after the same, you know, money that's available. And that needs to break down. But also I said, we do need a center for nonprofits in Mecklenburg County. I've always wondered why we didn't have one. I remember having to call Rocky a long time ago and saying, you know, does a nonprofit have to get licensed in Mecklenburg County? Because someone had asked me that. And this was several years ago. And Rocky was like, no. And I was like, well, you know, that kind of started me thinking that, you know, we're all missing different pieces. So, and we need a center. We need something that can bring these people together and break down those silos, because you don't need 75 early literacy nonprofits. You know, I mean, you don't. So, I mean, if you do, you do, but you know what I mean? So.
Yeah, the Foundation for the Carolinas attempted to do that. And they were going to reward organizations that combined into one with the resources, the funding to do the work. But because of the fiefdoms, right? Because of the lordship, because folks are like, I have my nonprofit, my mission is the best, and I'm not teaming up with anyone else. There's a level of, I don't want to call it selfishness, because I'm not even sure that it's selfishness, but there's just an inability, too rigid, where they just can't work together, right, with other people.
Right.
The beauty, though, in the Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy and where I come in with this organization is I'm always pointing to an empty chair in my room and saying, there's a client sitting in that chair. What do they care about the name of your organization or his? What do they care about your mission or their mission if we're not serving the client? Again, not an issue-based, nonprofit-based thing. We need to become more client-based. And when we're able to kind of dispel or get rid of all that other stuff, right? I mean, there's 75 literacy programs. Maybe that's too many, but there's a lot of, I mean, we need to increase literacy on so many levels. What if it was no longer about mine and I'm doing by myself out here, but what if it was mine and I'll go to East Charlotte on this road, you go to West Charlotte, you go to South Charlotte, you go to the prisons, and we have now, you know, commissioned 75 literacy programs to go out and on a consistent level provide literacy training for folks. Wouldn't that, you know, you've heard the saying, you know, the rising tide means all the ships get better or rise with it, no matter the size. What if we had 75 literacy programs working together to rise that tide? We all benefit, but we can't, again, have the dots connected. We can't get aligned because we're just fighting for funding, or we're trying to run corporations, or we're worried about, you know, making the bottom line, or we're doing work that we're so passionate about. We don't ask for help or realize when it's not really a good organization anymore, right? And we're afraid to close the doors, or we're afraid to bring in new leadership and transition to something more powerful. So there's a lot of issues there. But for folks that are struggling with that, as you know, it's the client who really suffers the most.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But
I'm going to recommend you for the next trust-based philanthropy cohort. It's going to, I don't know when they're going to start it, but we just finished our second one. So the third, I'm going to recommend you for that. You're speaking the language.
Yeah. Yeah. But I like your quote, your comment too, no relationships and no trust in Charlotte's nonprofit community. And I think that's very true, right? But I think that's where I get to show up. And I think folks know me, I'm a brand in some ways, but folks know, like, I'm really here for the client. I'm here for those Black, brown, poor, white folks. I'm there for the community that really wants to help. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not here for for sake of advancing a banner, it's
Mhm.
let's get our boots on the ground.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
Yeah.
not because I just showed up or I was in a 2016 video. I've been doing this work and building those relationships, right, since I've come to Charlotte.
Yeah.
And it's that longevity of you're really doing the work that matters. I'll say this as just a quick aside. Folks always say to me, man, you should be a politician. You should run for politics. And what I say to them is, listen, I really appreciate that compliment, because what you're saying is the work that I'm doing is what politicians
Should be doing.
should be doing.
Mhm.
Exactly.
They're not, right? I'm not going to become a politician, but I will continue to do this work. And we should all then be doing the work.
Yeah. And I appreciate, this whole meeting today, Rocky. Thank you so much for putting this together, because I have a better understanding of what CCLA does. And I see, how centralized it really can be, especially when you're talking about client-based. So, and how you could be, a big connection to a lot, like the library can as well, the nonprofit services. But you're right, there is always a reason why someone's coming to you with civil issues that they can't resolve. On that note, I do have to go get on the desk. Thank you so much. I do apologize for having to step out, but
I actually have 2 o'clock as well.
this has been fantastic. So,
Great, guys.
So I'll reach out. Thank you.
thank you.
Toussaint, thank you so much for coming on the leadership series. Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy, charlottelegaladvocacy.org. They are a 501c3. So I know they do get some funding, but you could be a part of that, because the facts are legal services is still way underfunded. I think for every 900 people, there's one legal aid attorney available. I don't know if the numbers are. It's still pretty lopsided against regular poor folks. That's just a fact. And so the more that you can help fund the systemic advocacy that Toussaint is talking about, and the leadership and such, that it'll help get more quote bang for the buck in that regard. It's a worthy investment of your time, and it's tax deductible as well. So don't sweat that. Anyway, thank you all for coming to today's leadership series. Obviously, I'll be in touch with you again, Toussaint, at some point. We haven't even had our sit down at the coffee house yet since you got back, so we got to get that done. But again, thank you very much. We'll probably be taking a break during July, but we'll be back in August with some more programming with the leadership series. So stay tuned, and thank you all. And this will be up on YouTube, so definitely I'll let you know, Toussaint, when I edit it and get it up on the tube. And you can obviously send that to your staff and anyone that I might have taught. Tell them that hanging out with Rocky again. He's cool. So, all right. Take care, everybody. Have a great week, and we'll be back in touch. Take care. Bye.